Carlos Ramirez, owner of NVS Audio in Roselle, New Jersey. Doing a wiring rescue on this Dodge Durango. Let me show you exactly why. Anybody that works on Dodges knows that these newer Dodges only should be interfaced with using some sort of digital interface. Whether it's an Amp Pro or a Nav TV Zen module or a Linkswell, there has to be some sort of signal correction in order to integrate with this truck. If you're just adding bass, you can use an Audio Control LC2, but they decided to upgrade the factory audio system. This vehicle has a very complex audio system from factory. It has multiple amplifier channels, it's active, there's a lot of stuff going on. Comes with, some of these models come with three-way components, which does a woofer, a mid, and a tweeter. So they upgraded the audio on this truck with a 4-channel amp, so it actually sounds worse than factory. It's killing his battery. Let me show you what they thought was an upgrade. So in the back, first we'll start on why his battery is being killed. I'm assuming they use signal sensing, so they didn't understand the architecture of the factory amplifier in this vehicle, and the amplifiers are staying on, so of course it's killing his battery. The truck is completely off right now, amplifier's on. And you hear that? The subs are randomly popping for no reason. They tried to upgrade the audio using what claims to be a 320 watt amplifier. For those that don't know, that's less power than the factory comes with on these trucks. So their upgrade was to go from 8-channel, 9-channel factory to 4-channel, well, if you count that one, 5-channel aftermarket, and less power. The factory is more than 320 watts. So we're gonna have to pull all this out. The customer's complaining that it sounded better from factory. All they did was give it more bass by throwing that giant subwoofer in there and taking up all his trunk space. Anybody that works on these newer Dodge trucks knows that the battery is under the passenger side seat. So when I didn't see any wires running under there, I knew they did this. First of all, that's the fuse holder that I say never, ever, ever to use. That's that evil glass fuse holder. And then on top of that, we're running 2 amplifiers, so 8-gauge wiring will not be sufficient. And of course, they didn't use oxygen-free copper. So we have cheap 8-gauge wire jumped off the factory fuse block, which has a 4-gauge feed from the battery. So now you're splitting the amount of power that the car needs to operate, stealing power from the fuse block instead of going directly to the battery. You're using cheap 8-gauge wire through a cheap glass fuse holder. And then we'll go to the back. I have no idea how the 8-gauge feed magically turned into 4-gauge. Cheap 4-gauge. Cheap 4-gauge. And I'm sure the customer does not appreciate the fact that they blasted big ass random holes in this plastic cover. And let's see if the amp's secured. I knew the screw was going to rip right out because it's screwed into the plastic mat. So, amplifier staying on, vehicle doesn't sound good, wired with cheap aluminum wire. Running under the factory jack, unprotected. Look at that. So we got some fixing to do here. All right, now that we have it apart, it's exactly what I expected to find. A mess of wires, cheap distribution block not bolted down, speaker ground self-tapped into the frame without cleaning the paint. More mess on this side. And behind the dashboard, behind the factory screen, we found exactly what I expected to find. A whole big disaster mess and an entry-level $10 line level converter to run the entire setup. The worst part is they use one line level converter to run front doors, back doors, and subwoofer. Disrespectful. Alan cleaned up the harness, got it tested, taped back up, soldered, heat shrunk like factory. Now we're going to be able to use the PAC Amp Pro and plug the T-harness in. Nice clean install. It's going to take digital output from the factory head unit and give us 3 sets of RCA's output. Whoever worked on the car the first time didn't realize that Dodge puts their proximity sensor here, and they just ripped it out, broke the connector, and re-glued it. There's the connector right there. All the new Dodges have it. That's how the proximity key works, where you walk up to the car, it unlocks. So they use black wire for positive feed off the battery. They couldn't fit all the cable into the connector, so they cut some of it off. And then the glass fuse holder, it's the absolute worst type of fuse. The glass fuse, the absolute worst type you could use. And then a bunch of tape to try and keep it tight in there. I think I like our way better. Stinger oxygen-free copper wire. Our favorite little connection fuse block, mini A&L. And then the fuse is held down with mechanical fasteners. Much better way to do it. That's another thing that annoys the hell out of me. We have 4 different types of screws to hold down 2 amplifiers, and there should be 8 of them. There's only 4. Terrible. Now look how much better of a solution that is. We have an PAC Amp Pro, which gives us 6 RCA outputs. Gives us sub-level control, and it pulls digital signal through a T-harness, through the factory radio harness. So look how nice and clean and pretty it looks in there. And now we have really good sound. Signal is usable. The car's gonna sound great. So for this car, this is the proper way to integrate. This is not the proper way to integrate. This is a good piece, but for a simpler car, or possibly just adding subwoofer, not to run 6 channels of amplification, door speakers in a car that has a heavy EQ curve, and it's just not the right way to do it. All right, we have this Dodge Durango wrapped up and ready to go home. One of the reasons the truck sounded so bad is they used a 120 watt JL Audio 4-channel amp to upgrade the factory system in this truck. The factory amplifier is 506 watts RMS. So the customer lost more than half his output, and there was absolutely 0 mid-bass in the doors. And without being able to use a summing device, processor, DSP, like the Amp Pro that we used, they were only getting limited signal to the new amplifier. Then they were also running it through this. So they only chose the front outputs. So the front outputs are not full range in this vehicle. So they're only getting partial signal, and then they split it to the 4-channel and the mono. So the bass wasn't getting proper frequencies, the doors weren't getting proper frequencies, the car just didn't sound right. So we kept all the speakers. He had JL Audio speakers installed that are pretty good. So we kept the speakers. We just upgraded to a Sound Digital 800.4. We used the PAC Amp Pro to get signal from the factory head unit. It also gave us a bass knob, so he has full control over his bass. We reused his Rockford 500 watt amp and his audio pipe subwoofer. This thing sounds really, really, really good now, and way better than factory. Just takes a little bit of time. Let me show you in the back how we cleaned this up nicely. We completely rewrapped the compartment to hide all the holes that the previous shop drilled. Everything is nice and clean. This is a new amp we supplied. We reused an amp that the customer previously had, but everything is wired as it should. Bolted to the board, not bolted directly to the vehicle. Nice, clean, ton of output.